One of the biggest challenges that leaders and employees are facing right now is that there has been rising complexity, and this has been almost exponential. Now, the challenge with this is, has our ability to navigate that complexity kept up at the same pace as the rising complexity? For most people, myself included, that answer is no. But here's the thing, we can elevate our complexity. And in order to do so, it's going to be helpful to understand that there are 4 different types of complexity. And we need to improve in each of these areas. The 4 different types of complexity are moral complexity, emotional complexity, behavioral complexity, and self-complexity. Let me talk about each of these at a really high level. Moral complexity is having the ability to discover solutions to moral dilemmas that does not entail conceding the needs and objectives of one ethical imperative over another. People with more moral complexity, they don't see the world in terms of whites and blacks. They see it in shades of gray. They don't see it in 2 dimensions. They see it in 3 dimensions. So people with higher moral complexity, they don't take shortcuts. They have the ability to think outside of the box. They have the ability to reformulate problems, to get to the root of the issue. And this allows them to come up with win-win scenarios or solutions, as opposed to win-lose or win-kind-of-win solutions. The greater our moral complexity, the greater our ability to navigate challenging ethical dynamics. Next is emotional complexity. People who are emotionally complex have the ability to do 3 things. They have the ability to differentiate between different emotions. The reality is that some people can do this and other people can't do this very well. Second, they experience a variety of emotions with great richness. Again, this is now more of the depth. To what degree can we get into our emotions? The reality is that many of the leaders that I work with struggle, myself included. And we experience diverse emotions simultaneously and sequentially. So for example, this is kind of the happy, sad, or fear and hope. We can hold multiple emotions simultaneously. That is another form of emotional complexity. What we've learned is that the people with greater emotional complexity have greater resilience, greater well-being. They can navigate the social and emotional dynamics of the workplace much more effectively. Third is behavioral complexity. This is the ability to perform multiple roles and behaviors necessary for the context that we are operating within. There's 2 components. There's behavioral repertoire. This is the range of behaviors that we can engage in. For example, do I see myself as a good public speaker and a good interpersonal communicator? Those are 2 different things, and maybe I see myself as and can perform adequately with both. Then there's behavioral differentiation. This is the ability to effectively employ the most appropriate behaviors or roles given that particular context. Another way of saying these 2 things is, how many hats do we have in our closet, and to what degree can I take off and put on different hats? Like, the reality is that many leaders, they wear the hat of doer. They want to be the doer of the work. They want to get things done. And unfortunately, what I find with leaders is that most leaders wear that hat too much. They have a hard time taking off that hat and putting on other hats, such as facilitator or such as empathizer, right? So the greater the roles that we could play and the different version of ourselves that we could bring to those different roles is the greater our behavioral complexity. Now, behavioral complexity is fairly similar to the next form of complexity, which is self-complexity. Now, self-complexity is just simply to what degree do we see ourselves as complex beings. The reality is that some people see themselves as being quite simple, and other people see themselves as being quite complex. How we see ourselves shapes just how complex we are. Again, there are 2 components to this. There's the breadth of the roles that we believe that we can play. How many different roles, and what are the variations of the different roles we feel we can play? The more roles we feel we can play, the more dynamic we become. And what are the breadth of our self aspects that we can bring to the table? For example, do I see myself as being charismatic and empathetic and humble and fill in the blank? Right? The more we see ourselves as having a variety of different attributes allows us again to be more dynamic, because we could bring a different version of ourselves to each situation we encounter. Because sometimes our situation is going to require that at one point in time I'm really charismatic. At another point in time I'm really empathetic. At another point in time or another context I need to be humble. The more we see ourselves as having elements of each of these different traits within us, is the greater degree that we will be able to bring out these traits in these different situations. So, these are the 4 different types of complexity: moral complexity, emotional complexity, behavioral complexity, and self-complexity. The greater we improve ourselves in each of these areas is the greater our ability to navigate the rising complexity around us. So let me invite you to better embrace the complexity within yourself and work to improve your complexity so that you could be the dynamic individual and leader that